Hello, it's Brad Laurie, or Blockchain Brad, and today, once again, I'm speaking with Sascha Ragtschaa. He is the CEO of WEOWN, or WEOWN, as it's been rebranded. Sash, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Brad. We tried to catch up for quite some time, and it's good to catch up again. Absolutely, pleasure.
Absolutely, mate. And for those who are wondering, this is entirely free. This is about providing transparent information from the source, from the CEO. There is simply no better information source than someone like Sascha. The aim of this also is to really provide a clear update and focus on what they've been doing since we last spoke. So Sascha, it's all on you today to really let us know what those key insights. Mate, I wanted to just recap a few things though before we get into those updates. For those who perhaps don't know that much about the WEOWN or the WEOWN network, one of the key statements is you want to be a next-gen digital asset investment platform. Can you just comment on that concept of digital assets and being an investment platform for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we focus on private businesses, and we're helping private businesses to raise funds and to get access to capital. At the same time, we want to democratize and give people from the investor space access to exciting businesses. So that's what the aim of our marketplace is. So pretty much connecting investors to businesses and helping businesses to get funding, to raise capital, borrowing and lending, and some of these new products.
Right. It seems simple, but given the added ingredient of blockchain, the complexities of crypto, we can get into more of how things are playing out. You have been very busy. Now, one of the things that you also claim is you're that one-stop shop platform, an end-to-end suite of services and a system or cycle that really provides and is replete from start to finish. Can you just explain how that is in the sense of being a full stack solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't just provide the technology platform and access to like our investor portal, the dashboards, the issuer portal compliance tools. It's not just about the technology, it's also about kind of the personal touch. So we help businesses if they want to launch an STO, we help them through the legal, through the regulatory side. We help them with incorporation if they need an entity in Europe. We help them with tax-related matters because, when you generate and create a security token, there's a lot of tax implications for both the issuer and the investors. Mm-hmm. So we help with that. We help with the running of it. Then every STO has a marketing element to it because, these companies need to go out and talk about themselves and promote their offer. And we have a number of companies that we're also working with that are helping these businesses. So this is the kind of like personalized full stack end-to-end servicing element. Mm-hmm. And then the other element is because it's such a new asset. I mean, digital securities. I mean, securities exist for, a few hundred years, but digital securities or STOs are such a new asset class. We have to do a lot of education and re-education, not just to the investors, but also to institutional people, to enterprises, and to these businesses. So it's kind of a watch and learn, educate, plus a hand-holding exercise that we have to do for quite a lot of people.
Right, and I was reading one of the interviews you've recently done. It was published on Medium, and you made the comment in that arguably one of the greatest challenges is to try and provide that key education to investors. Do you still, consider that to be a major challenge, is trying to really convey across to not just the crypto sector, but the more mainstream sector of the value of digital securities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I talk to the traditional, financial services providers all the time, and they literally have no idea. They don't even know what a token is. So you have to explain that it's a digital asset. It runs on the blockchain. It's immutable. You can transfer it around. And you have kind of metadata and the footprint on it, and they get that, but you have to explain it. People have no idea what a token is. At the same time, from the investor space, we're getting a lot of engagement through our community, and a lot of them are quite crypto savvy. They want to deal and trade and speculate immediately. And that's also not what it's all about with securities. I mean, there's liquidity and there's future liquidity with the new exchanges, but you have to educate the investor side, the institutional side, the enterprises, and then the businesses. The businesses, they have a funding need, they have a capital raising need, and you have to explain to them the benefits over doing an STO, launching it privately and publicly, versus going to your bank and going to a VC, etc. So there's a lot of education that you need to do, but we really love that because we feel we are responsible for this kind of new world, and we want to ensure that people understand all the benefits. Yeah, and that's what we're all about.
And Sascha, in that context, obviously the requisites for the team are extensive because you do have to pitch consistently and constantly. Do you feel like you have the resources required to provide the key information to the many parties, I would imagine, who are now trying to engage with your suite of services, and obviously those other services to come, so that you can build business efficiently and productively?
Yeah. I mean, you never have enough resources, right? You could always have more. You could always have more funding for marketing and these sort of things. But we have enough for what we do now. We're definitely ramping up in the business development side because that's an area that's fallen short over the last few months. So we're recruiting and hiring a lot of more business people. On the tech side, on the operational side, we're really, really well covered. But yeah, I mean, as a growing business, we need to add more people. And those people will then equally be trained and educated to spread the word. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, with regard to some of the key, I guess, assets that you bring, or the key drivers of value, you focus on issuance, investor management and engagement, and also just being that replete whole system. Could you just comment on those for a minute, just with regard to the value, particularly of issuance, for example, especially considering you're a world first as we move into this decentralized sort of approach to digital securities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our issuance platform is, you can basically generate an offer and you can create that self-service, and it's not yet fully self-service. You still need legal engagement. You still need kind of some of the tax experts in, the regulatory, engagement as well. But we're creating more and more automation on self-service, and our aim is really to have it fully self-service and automated. So that's the challenge on the issuance and listing part. There's also a big kind of assessment and review. So we're working with audit firms that review the books of these institutions that we're onboarding. With startups, we're looking at, their decks, the entire kind of startup suite, and 99% of those will never actually make it into a listing because they're just simply not ready to do a raise or offer. They're simply not good enough. And so there's a lot of manual and kind of personalized work that goes around it before someone lists onto our platform. And then the servicing element is really about kind of shareholder management, because you suddenly have raised a few funds, you have token holders, they're shareholders in your business, and you need to manage them, right? And you need to communicate with them. You have potentially dividends to pay, you have corporate actions to do, you have financial reports, tax reports, and all of that can be done through our platform and through one platform. And we do everything ourselves. We obviously have partners for that engagement, legal, regulatory side and the audit side, but the platform and the servicing element and a lot of those things can be done through one product and not through 12, 15 different products.
Right.
And that's what we do.
Well, there's certainly a lot involved in what you've built already, and we'll get to that in terms of itemizing some of those things. But essentially, I wanted to just touch on the foundation focus. It seems to be, since we've been speaking from the outset in many interviews, that you're still building this foundation, to get to that point of a very robust STO pipeline and, evidence of a strong onboarding of STOs. So do you still find truth in that you're still building the foundation?
On the equity side, we're pretty much sorted. I mean, you can always improve. You can improve the portal. You can improve the servicing elements. You can improve the speed, like things like a digital prospectus, which I think I've mentioned a few times, which we're working on. These things can improve and will make the experience better. Also, usability things on the portal, on the mobile apps and all that, you can always refactor and improve that. But from our perspective, the equity stream, basically raising money through, tokens that have, equity ownership attached to that, that the foundations from us are done. What we are doing now is heavily improving our partnership model, our engagement model, our business development model. That's a massive focus for us. But technically, we're pretty much, 80, 90% there. The platform's there. We do raises already. And it works.
And we're definitely going to talk about that. There's a big, development you have had now with your first STO having become live and functional. I wanted to just touch on the slogan of equity without entry barriers as well, because that also, suggests that you're good to go now, that the gates are open for business. And in that context also, I want to sort of address some of the previous discussions we've had with regard to an idea of floodgates. Perhaps we need to remove the word flood and just talk about openness and the position you're in now, which is open for business, given that you've made that start in the first STO.
Yeah. I mean, it's getting the first one over the line is always the hardest. The second, the third, the fourth, the 10th, etc. is always a bit easier. So, the guys from Project Crowd, they've done a fantastic job with us for the last 6 months. It's taken longer than we all expected, partly due to the legal and the regulatory side of things. And that's some of the learnings we've taken away. But yeah, I mean, we are seeing a lot of interest now that the first one is over, because no one wants to be first, but everyone wants to be second and third. So that's good. And with your comment to my, I think I wrote somewhere something about the floodgates are now open. I know people get a little bit funny with
terminology.
They put, how do you say, terminology? They put gold into every single word you're saying, and
especially in
it
crypto,
is what it is.
We really, and to be fair to all of them as well, everything hinges on the word of the CEO and the team. So that's why I want to clarify with you more directly as well, Sascha, in that what's your sentiment with regard to the processes and how and the pipeline as well with STOs? How confident are you now that there's going to be a more expedited process and more flow and proof of STOs coming on board?
I think with STOs that the jury's still not out, right, in that sense. And we're finding it as well. We're seeing a lot of interest, and people are definitely now ready to be onboarded after the first one. But we're also seeing a lot of businesses that are still on the sidelines. They're looking, they're seeing, they're wondering, how's this going to work? Unfortunately, crypto in itself has a really, really bad taste amongst institutional and enterprises. And the crypto communities don't help themselves, because it's, there's a very, very toxic and a very, very aggressive and rebellious attitude in that space. And we've seen businesses shying away from, some of those things, because they're saying, this is crypto related. So again, you have to educate people, and you have to say, this isn't crypto community stuff. This is securities. There's regulation, legal things around it. It's a model. I think it's a model that will absolutely change the way we raise money in future, and the way we manage securities in future. But it takes time, and our community expecting always things tomorrow and yesterday, and business just doesn't work like that. So we're not
to balance the two worlds of blockchain and develop the business, grow the ecosystem, but also appease essentially those who invested in this pre-utility and utility as well. So we'll get to some of that as well, Sascha. But I wanted to talk to you. We can bring it back to sort of recap on some of the key assets in terms of what you've done so far, and then we can move forward to future building. Now, already established things like a dual blockchain, staking systems have been built in, fast platforms done, decentralized digital register, right from the outset, you were the world's first in that as well, and the validator system. Now, with those things, I just wanted to ask, are you confident that those things are now finished as well, and that they've produced some sort of strong basis for everything that you have to build in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our register, for example, that's the heart and soul of what we do. And again, we're adding more features and functions to it, but that's ready, that's being used. So private businesses are already using that. All the other elements, the validators, the staking, the explorer, the wallets, and all that, they all need updates. They all lack certain features and functions. But yeah, I mean, the majority is pretty much done. I mean, we're only adding little bits and pieces in there. We don't need to refactor major components. We're pretty much completed from a utility perspective. What we're needing to do now is to onboard businesses, partnerships, enterprises, and really get that side going.
Exactly. And that's really what I wanted to touch on now, a great segue, because I wanted to talk about proof in the context of proof of use, proof of adoption, proof of enterprise, proof of value, even to the point of your token and that correlation with the enterprise, and just proof of quality of startups as well. Sash, you mentioned before that you do a vetting process. I mean, all of these proofs are so essential for, we talk about trustless systems, but trust in the value of the ecosystem as you build. Can you just comment on these proofs of once again, of the adoption, of the use, and enterprise, and so forth?
Adoption in the use of our ecosystem, or what?
Right. Just really just to try and articulate more of that empirical proof rather than just discuss plans. What to date, what proof do you have with regard to a means of adoption, means of use, means of enterprise, for example, to utilize the system?
Yeah, I mean, the proof we have is we have a first live offer. It's running, it's working. Investors can effectively buy equity in those businesses. The interfaces and the payment mechanisms are working. Our validators are working. They're validating transactions. The network, the public network component is working really, really well. So the utility works out. Yeah, what we need to onboard now is businesses. Yeah, and that's what we're quite busy with at the moment.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about that then, Sash, because that's fundamental for also the investors listening, or for those who want to support that utility, because naturally want to see the ecosystem of WEOWN grow. You must have business on board to do that. So can you talk us through what you know so far as the CEO with regard to the pipeline of business? Again, not to FOMO, but just so we can really crystallize the potential and understand the inner workings of the team as you move forward.
Yeah. On the equity side, we have a healthy pipeline. I think we have 10, 15 businesses that are engaged with us, that are going through various stages. And, most of them will probably launch in 2020 because it just takes time to get the prospectus, the marketing and everything going. We have our aim over the next 3 to 5 years is hundreds and hundreds of businesses. So over the next 3 to 5 years, that number will massively increase based on the STO market, the adoption levels becoming more stabilized, our business development ramping up, and some of those things. So that's the equity side. So that is looking really, really good. We're also launching a new product, which is about private debt. So basically businesses can take a loan through institutional or semi-professional investors. And that will be quite huge because there are small amounts. Someone can borrow 20,000 euros or 50,000 or 100,000 euros. And at the back end, you have institutional investors basically providing that money. We're looking at rating tools where basically credit scores, credit ratings can be analyzed. And we're looking to launch that in the German-speaking countries early, so basically Q1 next year. Mm-hmm. And that's an additional, product stream besides equity. Basically providing and focusing on private and corporate debt.
Okay, so there's more products to come. That's clear. 2020 is a big year for you in many instances. But I wanted to move back to that conversation, that interesting comment you made with regard to many businesses and many enterprise sectors not really being convinced yet, according to you, about the value that crypto and blockchain can bring and for their own business interests. How are you going to break that, Sash, with regard to the PR model that you have, or whatever strategy you're going to employ, to really break those barriers down, those misconceptions perhaps, and that those misunderstandings of what crypto has created with regard to this price pushing, the focus on price appreciation, to move beyond that? How are you going to really break through this as you want to try and expand into those hundreds that you mentioned?
Well, I will try my best, but it's not me being able to change that, right? It's the blockchain technology and the industry. And I've sat last week in London with some of the partners that we have been engaged with for 2 years now almost. Mm-hmm. And they are... Hi, can you still hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, I can still hear you. It just
sorry.
That's okay.
Just the video went off. Anyway, no. What I wanted to say is, I spoke to a number of partners and large businesses. They have, they service hundreds and hundreds of banks, and they're looking at different technology platforms. They looked at cloud. They looked at blockchain and all that. And we've been engaged with them for quite some time now, 2 years, for example. And they said to me, they can now see slowly the value of blockchain, and they can see now slowly the use cases evolving within that traditional world. So if you look back 2 years ago, we talked to them, they were really, really excited, but they couldn't really grasp it. And this is this kind of this is this hype curve, right? We're hopefully now getting into a stage where it's about stability, it's about use cases, and the businesses and the projects that have survived will hopefully support these traditional businesses with actual business usage. And that doesn't exist in that sense, it didn't exist last year. And, the larger businesses, they simply sit it out and they wait until this whole fight with, is it BTC or BCH or whatever. I mean, all this crap, to be honest, doesn't help blockchain.
If I can just jump in for a minute and just add to that and discuss this a bit more, given that there is such a strong, sort of tribal sort of scenario playing out right now, as we're alluding to, do you think that in time there'll be a less is more approach where we'll see essentially a filtering of the current scenario that we see, the current number of startups, so that tech takes precedence and that essentially we start to see a more tech-centered and tech-focused future for both blockchain and crypto, and thus, as that sort of change happens, really brings in the mainstream attention, the enterprise focus and potential adoption of startups like yourselves?
No, I think it's the opposite. It was too tech-centric. People read white papers and people got really excited of reading a technical white paper, but hardly anyone had an actual business white paper. Yeah. So what we're seeing now is that those projects and teams that have an actual business case, they have actual business benefit, they're actually doing something that people need, and it makes sense and people can understand it, and they're still here. They will survive. I think we're seeing a new wave of projects and companies that will add something to it. You'll see some existing players that will survive. But I mean, you go to these blockchain conferences. I went to a blockchain conference 2 days ago in London, and I was there luckily only for 5 or 10 minutes. And you hardly see anyone there. You see the old people, that are still touting BTC or BCH. They're fighting on stage, and to be honest, it looks really, really sad. So if that's the state of the technology, then I think it's good, because it means that businesses, projects are actually focusing on implementing what everyone has been preaching. So I can definitely see that. And again, the financial services providers and the partners we're talking to, they are starting to see the value of blockchain, and we can actually show them real utility and real utilization. And that's what will prevail.
Right, and obviously your experience in business as well, Sascha. It's interesting you make those comments, because we're even seeing now through different media streams comments to that effect, where many people are suggesting that it would be good for many of the startups to move into the mainstream sectors that they want to focus on, to really bridge the gap rather than those crypto conferences, as you said. So is that also your focus, that you want to make sure that you're engaging in mainstream businesses that can really essentially benefit from your technology, from your full stack solution, and to essentially just perform better, to have better outcomes for themselves, especially in the SME area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our focus is the traditional world. We're pitching to traditional businesses, small to medium enterprises. We're pitching to investors that want to invest in these small to medium enterprises. And there are a lot of them. They have no crypto experience. They're not from the crypto community. We know that the crypto community in itself will not invest in STO. That's the reality of it, because those are more longer term vehicles. Those are more kind of traditional vehicles. But at the same time, for us, it's always the biggest challenge for us is balancing crypto and the community with kind of our traditional focus. And that's why we get a lot of feedback on our branding and on our messaging. People in the crypto space need to understand that our branding and messaging is tailored towards the traditional world, is tailored towards digital millennials. And if we can bring crypto with us and kind of bridge that gap, that would be the ideal scenario. But one or the other is always that's the hardest for us to balance at the moment.
Right, and we're certainly going to try and push for that today by asking some of those hard-hitting questions for the crypto community. But with regard to utility and security, I just wanted to quickly ask you about this, because even in the interviews you've done recently, you mentioned there's a lot of misconceptions about the terms utility token and security token in the sense of STO. So can you just comment from your perspective whether or not you firstly think or regard utility tokens as something that is provable, is real, has a future, and can you distinguish that between the security that is so imperative to the future of your own ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, utility tokens, there's a debate, will they continue? Will they exist? I think I mentioned last time to you, Brad, I think it will survive over time. And the jury's still out for some of these utilities, but utility tokens have a real good sense. If you look at network usage, platform usage, utility tokens are a really, really good thing. And that's a brand new asset that's been created in the last few years. And that's amazing. This is innovation. Security tokens and securities, that's the traditional financial vehicle. Financial services, securities, they come with regulation, they come with compliance, they come with KYC AML for investors. They come with protection around a lot of these things. They come with law, governance, and these sort of things. So it's a whole different world. A utility or crypto exchange doesn't need to be regulated and can do whatever they want to. In the security token space, you can't do that. You have to have compliance, you have to have risk, you have to have an audit, you have to have security controls, you have to be checked by the regulator, and every offer that we're doing goes through a regulator, and will be checked if it matches what the business is saying. So it's a whole different complex
Let's talk
level.
about that. Sorry to interrupt, but let's talk about that in the context of regulation, because you raised a very important point that if we're talking about utility tokens, that tends to also align with notions of unregulated environments, and especially with regard to support from the top down. There's a dearth of that right from the outset. And then you have the flip side, where there's a very, very strong infrastructure already pre-existing for securities, all the way back to Wall Street and beyond. So in that sense, what's your position on regulation? And are you confident the two worlds can coexist?
I'm not sure. I don't. I think utility tokens have an existence, right? And they're unregulated. And I think a lot of projects have proven that it works unregulated in that sense. So I think that's okay. I think for security tokens, there's still a lot that needs to be done. I mean, in Liechtenstein, we have the Blockchain Act now that improves a lot for STO issuance companies and servicing companies like ourselves. It provides a legal groundwork and framework. That is great. It also defines what a utility token is. So Liechtenstein has been super, super innovative in this space. But then you look, for example, in the US. In the US, it's really, really hard to do an STO. And I feel sorry for any US company having to deal with that. So in the US, in the US, the Jobs Act, a lot of these things still need to improve. If you do Reg A, Reg D, Reg S, it is so expensive. It's almost not a viable model to do an STO. In Europe, we're in a much, much better position. We're seeing the same in Singapore. Hong Kong is looking to do, I'm not sure about Australia, but regulation needs to improve, simplify. In the securities law, I'll give you a good example. It states you need a CSD because clearing and settlement has to happen, and it has to happen over a few days. Now, blockchain technology and a decentralized ledgering technology, you have no more settlement risk. You have no more counterparty risk. So a CSD is not required. Yet the law mandates that you need a CSD. So these things need to change, and they will change over time, because I know a lot of people in the decentralized world think the government and the regulators are bad, but they are actively trying to improve economies. They're actively trying to protect the businesses and the investors, and they're equally pushing for innovation. So these laws and frameworks will change over time, and the European Union is doing it at the moment anyway.
Right, and Sascha, you've always been a proponent for working with governments, working with legal frameworks. You mentioned Liechtenstein. It's been tweeted recently, and there's a lot of buzz about that law passing. What does it mean specifically for the WEOWN network with regard to how you can move forward now? What kind of doors does it open specifically, especially given you have that first mover advantage of having all the different tools in your full stack solution?
Just in simple terms, we can do what we need to do to issue and service STOs. And in a lot of countries, issuance providers, like in the UK, for example, they can't do that. They can't issue and run and do STOs. We can do it in Liechtenstein. We have the legal framework. We have the government support. We have the regulator that understands what we're doing. And we can do that across Europe. We can do offers across Europe. There are a lot of things that we cannot do and we're not allowed to do. And that's part of, the regulatory review. But all these things, you cannot do in certain countries when the legal framework isn't there. What they are, I'm not going to say, because I'm not going to build up knowledge for the competitors.
Okay, I appreciate that. So in the context of now, once again, that legal door is open, you've already shown with Proud that you've come forth with your first STO live on your network. What are you doing with regard to governments in that sector? And are you moving beyond Liechtenstein? Are you having conversations in Europe where you're starting to really work with governments to really educate them for the first instance, and then move beyond that to try and collaborate in a business sense?
Yeah, we focus on, we work with Liechtenstein. We're also looking at Asia quite heavily at the moment. And obviously we're keeping our eyes and ears open in the US through our partner network. So we're engaged in a lot of these conversations, but at the same time, we're not wasting too much time with governments and regulators either. Mm-hmm. We focus on the areas where they matter most, and we engage and people know us. But we're focusing on business first, right? We want this business to run. We want the utility to kick in and all that. I'm not trying to change the planet in the sense of changing all the laws. However, we're always there when someone's asking us when we need it. And we're definitely very, very active in the regions where we're moving into.
I see. Well, it sounds like, Sascha, that you were just looking for that legal green light, and now that you have it, you can really move forward with that pipeline of businesses that obviously some of them you're not mentioning, you're not telling me for NDA reasons, but we'll still try and dig later. Now, with regard to the idea of the sweet spot, as you've mentioned with SMEs, how is all of that going? Is there any proof that businesses are actually provably benefiting from the integration? I know it's so early, but how do you show and pitch this idea, and how do you start to sort of provide some sort of evidence to these companies before they move on to the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a lot of businesses are conducting or wanting to do an STO because it comes with digital and innovation focus rather than raising money the traditional way. Also, it is about building a community. So a lot of the businesses that we've talked to don't even have a digital following. They have no community. They have no Twitter. They have no, no forums as such, and they have no fans outside of their industry. And part of doing an STO is also about building a community, doing marketing, PR, going on roadshows, presenting, which you don't have to do if you go to a bank. You're relying on the bank manager to give you money for your business, rather than building up a fan base, through institutional and retail investors. So that's a big benefit for a lot of the businesses that want to be more digital. And let's be honest, every SME, at least the ones we're seeing here in Germany, in Austria and Switzerland, have a digital transformation program. They need to improve their digital online footprint. And that's where an STO is perfect, because it's 100% digital. Now, the other benefit is what everyone always talked about is liquidity, right? When you have an STO and you basically pass on a token, you have immediately liquidity. Yeah. However, there are hardly any exchanges available. So liquidity is not yet there. And that's why we're building an exchange and building an OTC peer-to-peer model so that these tokens can be traded short-term and long-term. But exchanges will appear. A lot of exchanges will not make it simply because they don't understand the rules around securities. And that's another big benefit. Again, that's unproven, but we will get there. Will it take 12 months or 6 months or 3 months? Who knows?
Well, we're going to dig deep and try and work out some of those timeframes as well, Sash. But I want to talk to you a bit more on the OTC comment you've made, and also the plans for the decentralized stock exchange that we've talked about in the past. They're two big ticket items for next year and beyond. So how is the development going for those two plans, and what you're trying to do to, I guess, build out the ecosystem even further?
Yeah, really good. The development is progressing really well. So by the end of the year, we'll have an OTC framework for peer-to-peer trades. So basically, you and I, we can agree on a price, and then we can trade with each other. That's something that'll be available. The full stack exchange, we're hoping to bring this live next year in terms of functionality, but it comes with a lot of regulatory licenses, requirements, exchange licenses, regulated market, MTFs, etc., etc. Again, I'm not revealing what we're doing because we tend to get copied from a lot of our competitors. But yeah, it's an ongoing progress. I'm hoping that the exchange in a pilot model will be available by the middle of next calendar year, running in pilot mode for maybe 6 to 12 months, and then going live, maybe end of the year or the year after.
So you're not really quite sure yet exactly when that'll come live. Have you dedicated a specific number of people to these plans or to these, these new additional features that you're building into the system?
Yeah, absolutely. Our backend guys are focusing on primarily the exchange at the moment. We have a lot of team members that are working on the regulatory, government, regulator engagements. We had a lot of workshops in Liechtenstein about it. And we are working also on the PR marketing side to slowly, kind of pitch and showcase what we're doing on the exchange side. I think we have some events in November that we're doing with some kind of closed door events because we're onboarding partners on the institutional side, fund managers, asset managers, banks, people that basically have a trading and dealing need. And we're also looking at different products. We're looking at hedge funds, private debt, corporate debt, as I mentioned before, next product for the exchange. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, there's a lot in that. Now, with regard to some tough stuff, we mentioned before the interview, I might ask you some stuff that will make you squirm a bit. But obviously, that's my role in trying to be as objective as I can. Now, one of the comments that has been made recently, some suggestion about a bit of a pushback with regard to the STO pipeline. So I wanted to just ask you directly to clarify this for us. There's a suggestion out there in the Twitter sphere and in crypto that you're planning on pushing back the STO plans to the third quarter of 2020. Is that actually true, Sascha? And what's actually going on with the plan and roadmap for STO specifically?
Oh, with the pipeline, I think someone in our team just changed the date from 2019 to 2020. There was no real story behind it. So the pipeline is as healthy and as strong as we have it and as we announced it. But we're debating to actually take that pipeline view offline because, again, people need to understand the pipeline is a pipeline. Pipeline isn't that these projects will land at the specific time. They are estimates, and some of those things actually get pushed back. We've seen a lot of things are being pushed back, and we might just take it offline because it costs so much angst and anxiety amongst people. And this is part of the issue. We're trying to be really transparent, but at the same time, we're seeing that we need to be a bit more defensive so people don't get too rallied up.
Right, well, that makes sense. So just to clarify, it sounds like what you're saying is that there's no specifics any longer with regard to time for the pipeline of STOs that are now in the works. But obviously, you want to just make sure that when they're ready, they're ready.
Well, I mean, it's not us dictating these timelines. People need to understand it. It's the businesses. If a business doesn't want to launch in Q3, they want to launch in Q4, then, I'm not telling them you need to launch in Q3. It's at the end of the day, their decision. If we make a projection and we put some estimates together and we're talking to the business and they're saying to us at the beginning of the process, we want to launch in Q3, but then it's Q4 or Q1 the next year, then we need to accept it as a business. And again, I'm not really worried about it, but the pipeline then immediately is outdated. And I think we're just taking it down, we're just taking it offline. We're anyway quite open and transparent, more than we actually should be, and it just creates too much noise.
I understand. So, Sash, in that context, let's move away from the discussion about timelines and promises with regard to when each of the STOs that you do have are going to effectively be live and functional. Let's talk more about what you do know with regard to the current pipeline of businesses and what you can tell us about the plans for those to actually become live. Obviously you are having discussions with some of them now with regard to their interests and when they want to come out as Proud Have. So what can you tell us more about subsequent STOs beyond this first one that's now live?
Yeah, I think the next one is VersaView. So basically, they're this kind of in-flight magazine agency. We've been talking to them for quite some time. I think they're ready to go. They're just waiting for the perfect moment. They're also they're waiting also for their own marketing and branding. When they will launch, I don't really know. Again, it's up to them. Yeah. And all the others, they're going through the legal reviews, they're going through regulatory reviews. And again, when they want to launch, it's up to them to find the market spot, find the sweet spot, find also the time and period of marketing. And unfortunately, we had a lot of legal delays, and that's why Project Crowd took longer than we thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just something we have to factor in. Yeah? But we're not really concerned about that. It will happen when these businesses will feel they are ready to launch.
Right. So do they disclose, to you, what's the process once they decide to list, Sascha? When do you find out as a team?
It's fluid. It depends on regulatory and legal reviews. It also depends on the token model. So some businesses come to us and they have a very, very complex token structure. They want to maybe, we had a project. They had three or four tokens actually. One was a utility, one was a security. There was a bit of a hybrid. So you're having discussions with them. They're also checking it with the legal guys, with the regulator, if it works out, if it makes sense. And then some of them go back and maybe change the model again. So initially you're thinking it'll take 3 months or 6 months, but then it could drag on depending on how quick these teams are. So honestly, we don't really know. It can, even if they say in 3 months' time we will be ready to go, then there could still be delays. But however, we have some that are really, really fast and really, really quick. So right. You can't tell.
I can see the challenge. I can already hear the crypto community screaming in my ears saying, well, perhaps that's just not good enough because they definitely want those dates. But what you're making it clear is that you don't have that control. It's up to those startups to essentially decide when they want to list. But are you confident as the CEO of the network that there's going to be an influx of listings, despite that you don't know exactly when these things are? Are you confident there's going to be a nice flow of STOs listing next year?
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, we would be in the wrong business. And I don't think we're in the wrong business. There's going to be an influx of new product streams, new work streams. I think the STO space, again, will still take some time. But yeah, I mean, we are working heavily in that space. I mean, that's our main business. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing our job.
Right. Okay. Now, with regard to the DSX as well, obviously that's a major thing, a world's first. Are you also confident that that's going to get the green light from regulators? Once you start to really build this, and what will that mean also for the value of your ecosystem once that really starts to kick into gear?
Well, the exchange is really important for us, the stock exchange, effectively, because it provides that liquidity element, that secondary market. So we're working heavily on that. Again, we're working with the government, we're working with the regulator, we're working through all the use cases. We're trying to be very light touch in terms of regulatory and compliance type requirements on the exchange. However, we have to play by the rules and we have to do things by law. I think what we're doing, especially with the OTC and peer-to-peer element, will give us immediate, a new, effectively liquid element, but it won't be full-blown, automatic order matching and trading and these sort of things. Again, I can't give any dates. We have obviously targets. As I said, we want that exchange to be functioning middle of next year. But how the licenses and everything will play out, that might take a little bit longer.
Right. Okay. Well, it's exciting though to hear that you are doing something that hasn't been done yet, and obviously you're taking your time to make sure you get it right. Now, with regard to the things that you have done in the past in terms of partnerships and development, names like Phytech, if I pronounced that correctly, an integration there with Mason Private Bank, with Tigermark by Surely, and then there's also, forgive me if I'm wrong, if I've mispronounced this, Sascha, but Nagili. You can help me out there. These kind of developments, and also yeah, there you go. I knew you'd correct me. So, and also with crypto tax, they're key developments or partnerships you've forged already. Do you want to just mention those and what they mean for the strength of your value and the ecosystem that you now have?
Yeah. So Vitec is our US partner. So they're a software company. They provide basically technology solutions, global wealth management solutions to, I think, 400 banks. The clients are Citi, Northern Trust, JP Morgan, et cetera, And we are working at the moment to implement our securities platform. So basically doing issuances, doing the settlement and trading, the peer-to-peer type elements into their global wealth management solution. So that's ongoing at the moment. So basically, we will be able to offer their global wealth management solution with our products in Europe, and they will be able to offer our products in the US, and that's the setup. So we will have access. We already have access to these 400, banks and asset and wealth managers with massive amounts of volumes, and they're quite excited about this kind of new innovative STO issuance kind of stream of work. And there's a lot of ideas for new products. So, for example, they have a product called Hedge Tech, which is a hedge fund product, and we're looking at building a product to provide liquidity into the hedge fund space. So that's really, really exciting. And again, that opens us up to the US, and it gives them an outlet into Europe and into Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Liechtenstein. So that's what we're really excited about Vitec. Mason Bank is our primary bank at the moment. We're obviously onboarding more private banks and more smaller banks along we go. With Mason, the Mason Group, I think they have 600 million users in China in their health and wealth management system. They have an online mobile app. It's being heavily used, and we're currently integrating our products and services into that ecosystem. So we're working with the bank to provide banking services and financial services, core banking services to our STO clients. They all need a bank account. They need a banking partner, and the Mason guys are really, really good. However, we're also utilizing the Asian network, and we're looking at other products specifically for the exchange and for our kind of servicing element into that Asian market. We have a lot of activity coming up. I think I'm in China in November and December on roadshows. So we're talking to some very, very large companies to basically connect our world, our SME issuance and servicing world into the Asian world and into the US world.
Right, and
so that's what we're working on from
and
a
the
partner
scope
perspective.
of that, and the scope of that, Sascha, is obviously immense, considering that it is China, the population.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of it is around kind of private debt and lending. And again, this will use our blockchain, we'll use our technology. And at the same time, as I mentioned before, we're really, really expanding our partner network. We're also talking to a number of incubators and venture capitalists that are onboarding SMEs to do that on our platform, because we can't just do all the legwork and the vetting of every business ourselves. We're looking at partners. So we're open to talk to partners that are focusing on SMEs and businesses. We're also onboarding now partners for institutional, semi-professional side for the private debt and lending piece. We're signing them up at the moment, and we provide the ecosystem around it. And that's working quite well. So our partner focus has been accelerated, and it's working out quite well. Okay,
well, there's a lot there. And with regard to Tigermark as well, by Shuli, and also Nagili, as you mentioned, do you want to comment on those as well with regard to those pre-existing or those existing partnerships that you now have?
Yeah, one of the ones that I mentioned before is really about growth and business and products and really getting usage. Negele and Surely and CryptoTax is all about the service as such. So CryptoTax, these guys are really, really good in the taxation space. They're really experts in the way you can do crypto exchange type taxes. So if you use that product, you can do your taxes, and it simplifies, the buying and selling, and everyone should do their taxes anyway every year. We don't want to reinvent that. We want to use taxation providers, and that's why we chose these guys, because they're very innovative. They're from Munich as well, so it works quite well. Surely the insurance guys, they have an interesting product specifically around STOs, the Tigermark product, and we're equally looking at that. We will prototype it in one of the next offers. Project Crowd doesn't run with Tigermark yet, but we will look at other offers that will have that insurance product around it. And Thomas Nageler and his team, and we also use a number of other lawyers, they're just helping us, making sure that all our offers are staying legally compliant and that we are doing as a business the right thing. So we outsource and insource as much as we can, but we want to use the best and partners for us. We tend to not partner with really, really large companies like large banks because they slow you down. We prefer the smaller guys, the innovative guys, because they're as hungry as we are to tackle this whole new industry.
Right. Well, it's clear. It's very clear that there are a lot of things happening for you with the partnerships you already have, and we can perhaps talk about some other plans, as we move on in the interview. Now, I wanted to just touch on your first STO. Give us some specifics of how successful that's been. What's the feedback been from that team? Are they happy with the outcome so far?
Yeah, they're very happy. I was at the launch event, I think the day before yesterday. And they filled all their private slots. They did a private round, which was really successful. They're very enthusiastic. They also acknowledge they're the first ones. They had to go through a lot of pains. I have a lot of respect for what they did. Everyone, I think every platform or a lot of people were launching STOs. But what they did was just VC rounds, right, with private investors.
They did, yes.
Very few have done a real public STO, and Project Crowd is one of the first ones to actually now do a real live public STO on a self-service platform, and that's what we're really proud about.
I see. So
it's small.
Was it
it's
seamless?
Small in size, but it's.
Was it seamless?
Oh, we had some. Yeah, it was pretty seamless. We had some issues here and there, just normal kind of system issues. I think some of the numbers didn't work out, and I think someone that had Danish fiat currency selected, saw some different things, but those are little niggles.
Okay. Now, they are a recruitment platform. Can I ask you, Sascha, why Crowd? Why did you sort of decide? Because you mentioned a few times you do vet, you make sure there's certain criteria met by each of the STOs now in the future. So why Crowd as the first one? What stood out?
I like the team, and the team in itself has done a lot of due diligence on STO platforms. They've equally chosen us as their STO or platform provider and helping them. They had to go through a lot of new things with us, and we needed someone that had patience, that was also able to brainstorm certain things with us. And they're very enthusiastic guys. I'm not commenting on their business model. I can't comment on what they're doing from a race perspective, but they are a really, really good team. So we are enjoying working with them.
I see. And congratulations, obviously, for now starting and really starting to showcase that you are a legitimate platform and that you can onboard STOs. Yep. I mean, it's a big deal to be able to say that. Moving on to a tough question now, and you are not going to like this, but it is with regard to the challenging area of price and token. You would be certainly aware of this already, being someone who does engage in Telegram. One of the serious criticisms that are being put forth by many different parties is this idea that the team itself is spending money on contractors. We've talked about this in the past. Allegedly, you use tokens to make sure that you can pay those parties. And there's a big concern from many people, as I prepared for this interview, that that's taking place, especially considering it's being done in the token itself, given that there's an illiquid scenario now, given there's low token supply. What would you like to say to those people who are sincerely concerned about payments to contractors in the token?
I mean, nothing's changed. I think I responded multiple times already to that, and I'm not going to respond any more on that. Absolutely not. It's silly, and we've told people, we've put a sheet together of what the tokens are being used for. People need to be focused on what we're doing as a business. I can't comment on the token. I can't comment on the token price. And that's all there is to say.
Right.
I'm not going to repeat myself.
And I respect that, Sascha. I guess that to press it a little bit more, though, imagining from their standpoint, they're trying to better understand, if they're a pre-utility supporter of what is now becoming a very viable ecosystem for STOs that you're building, they're suggesting that, is there another means to try and pay contractors, if you're raising funds in fiat? If they're trying to understand also the scenario that's now played out where there's less volume. And rightly so, some have suggested, well, in a scenario where there's been a depreciation of the token itself, that will require more tokens to then go and pay some of the the parties that you do need to. So it's just simply an objective question from their side to say, look, can you better educate us about the process so that they understand? Because if we remove the sentiment of emotion from this, I think it's still a fair question to pose.
Yeah, and I've responded to that.
Okay. All right. Well, I can hear from, I hear what you're saying. All right. Now, if we can move across now to essentially the issue of liquidity as well. Now, we have seen a transition into a more liquid scenario, exchanges as well. There's been a lot of conjecture and questioning about the quality of some exchanges, not just you, but just across the sort of the wider scope of crypto itself. Now, what can you tell us about your situation? Are you concerned about exchanges? Are you concerned about liquidity issues?
Absolutely. I mean, we are trying to support our community as much as we can. I'm aware of the exchange situation and the liquidity situation. We're working through that, and it will eventually be addressed.
Okay. Now, again, won't like this, but if I start to name some of the exchanges, BitMax came up a lot in the prep for this, and it's never great to have to discuss specific exchanges, but this exchange had come up. I wanted to ask you about what your plans are with regard to expanding into other exchanges, and what is actually happening with BitMax with regard to how much influence they perhaps have on the outcome of and the performance of your token. I mean, if you could just clarify for us a little bit more about what you know as CEO about how things work like this.
I don't run these exchanges. I don't know what they do. I have no interest to really, dictate to them. I heard a lot of things that are very concerning, and that makes me quite upset. Have I seen and heard anything of what they do? No. I know as much as others know, and that is a concern for us, and that's why we're actively looking for other options.
So you're certainly open to the prospect of more exchanges and more liquidity opportunity?
Absolutely.
Okay. Right.
We're working through this. Because people don't see us talking about it because we cannot talk about it, assume we're doing absolutely nothing. But I have and I am speaking to every single exchange that is out there.
Right.
But certain things I don't like about them, certain things I don't want to do. Yeah, I'm not going to pay $500,000 or $1 million. Absolutely not. In cash. That's not what we're going to do. And that's why it's taking a little bit of time. But unfortunately, and this is the dirty secret in that space, you need to pay hard cash to them to be listed and to be run. And I'm not willing to basically put my business in jeopardy to be listed on these kind of massive exchanges without any sort of control or whatsoever. Yeah? And that's why it's taking a little bit of time. But we are actively working through that. I have 2 guys that are tasked to do that on a daily basis.
I see. So clearly you vet also those relationships or those prospective ones. If you are going to work with other exchanges, you clearly have internal criteria to make sure that they meet the standard. Does wash trading...
Well, yes and no. Yes, okay. Yes and no. And if an exchange lists us, we have no control. We have public APIs and they're using it. They can do it. That's why we can't get rid of certain exchanges that are listing us or have listed us.
I see.
That's unfortunate. I'm not doing, I know a lot of people think we're arrogant and we're doing vetting of the exchanges. We don't do that. Yeah. But I don't want to play by their rules in terms of paying them a ton of money. And it is a ton of money that you need to pay. So we're looking for upcoming exchanges, for good exchanges, for exchanges that might give us a strategic edge. Again, I'm not shying away to pay, but when it impacts the business and what impacts what we want to do long term, then you have to make a decision.
And that should make sense.
Sorry, I'm already more open than I should be.
Well, that's okay, because I can hear what you're saying. You're essentially saying that you don't want to forego all control in the sense of, it's going to affect your business. When we see the likes of some of those nefarious exchanges play out, we've seen the wash trading, we've seen the very concerning poor volumes, lots of, questionable conduct. what you're saying is you're trying to protect and insure your company by making sure the exchanges are of merit or have some sort of semblance of real value, of authentic volume.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of these larger ones, and I won't any name, but the biggest one, that their listing process is geared towards stealing your IP. I mean, we know that. Again, and do I want my IP to be stolen? Absolutely not.
All right. Okay. So can you give us
that's the protective mechanism.
Can you give us any hints of the kinds of or types of exchanges that are piquing your interest right now?
I like Bittrex. I like Bitfinex. These sort of ones.
Okay. All right.
They're good, but again, I'm sure they have skeletons.
Right. Okay. And what about compliant exchanges? I understand that there are some, in various regions of the world where they're really focusing on compliance and making sure they're regulated. And some of them are new and up and coming as well, and starting to get a bit of attention now. Are you paying attention to some of those?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So
we always like those that are playing by the rules, that are regulated, that are doing the right thing. They would be my primary focus and my primary target. And if you know any, just let me know.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you also about, and it's a really tough one, Sascha, and I certainly don't expect much of a comment, but the price decline, it's happened across the board for many of the altcoins, as they're called, but it's clearly happened in your scenario. Without trying to comment on price itself, can you just comment more generally on the volatility of the space? And what would you say to those people who have been those pre-utility investors, wanting the best for you as you build? What would you say to them as, you watch this play out, in a more macro sense?
Well, we have a community, and we have a lot of people that have bought into the utility almost like 2 years ago, and they've been with us for a long time, and they're the hodlers, right? They are with us, they support us, they are critical, they give us feedback and we listen to that. And those are the ones that I like, and we support them. And to those, I can say we're continuing with the road we've chosen, right? We've not strayed away from our vision. We're actually adding more products, which will add to the utility, and they should be happy. The industry as a whole is filled with traders and speculators. And at the moment, I think I would guess there's an 80-20 split between traders and speculators and those that have a long-term focus. And that's why you have volatility. If you have traders and speculators, they have no interest in your business, they have no interest in your product. They jump on the slightest big news, and then they move on after 30 days, 20 days, 10 days, or 2 months, or 3 months. I think you only have a sustainable model if you have long-term holders across the board. And that's what cryptocurrencies, from a trading side of things, just simply don't have. A lot of retailers have exited, and what you have left is the traders and speculators. And that's why you get this massive volatility across the board.
So how do you address that as a team? Obviously, it's a concern to you because you want to support those early supporters as best you can in the most, sort of common sense approach. But once again, how do you flip that 80-20 split on its head so that it's commonplace for people to just take that longitudinal position, ride, just value the asset that it is, and let it, grow and become that utility token that, it's designed to be?
I think you have to push the utility. This is what we're doing. Our blockchain usage, our network usage, by implementing the new product, lending, the exchange, will push the utility and will push the usage. And that's the only thing that we can control. I cannot control the exchanges. I cannot control the traders and speculators and what people can onboard. I can only control the business and the direction, and we're proceeding with the business in that direction. And hopefully we're creating more fans that will basically understand that we're in it for the long game. That's all I can do.
Sure. Does it concern you at all that because you have the lack of control on some of those exchanges, Sascha, that there may be wash trading, there may be really concerning manipulation happening from their part, and that obviously has an indirect, at the very least, effect on your token, on your ecosystem? Does it concern you that that is enabled through this open system?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the detriment of the cryptocurrency and the crypto community is that sort of behavior. Watch trading, manipulation, pump and dump groups, all the stuff that you're seeing and you can watch from afar is a problem. And the small guys are again losing out. These organized groups and these exchanges that basically are abusing their powers, that could collapse the whole system. And we're actually quite close to that.
Right. Well, let's talk about that, because that's a big statement. Now, we see even today, in this day and age, that there are still pump and dump schemes emerging. We see the collusion happening between certain, key actors, whether they be exchanges or VCs, or the depth is significant. Does it concern you that when you see strong narratives emerge of the sort of speculation coupled with superficial partnerships, coupled with, as we're alluding to, some of those nefarious sort of actions that prop up price, does it concern you that they're the ones getting a lot of the attention, as opposed to those that are just head down, bum up, working really hard to really build out something that is sustainable and long term?
I think it concerns me for the damage these guys are causing. And, it is a problem, and it's becoming more obvious. And I mean, you can just see it, right? You look at cryptocurrency curves and the way prices have moved, and you can just see it. That's not normal. That's not organic. So that I'm concerned. Am I concerned overall and over time? No, I think if you have a long-term 10, 20, 50-year horizon, that'll be a tiny blip. Yeah, and this is, I think, why we're excited about STOs and securities, because there's a lot of control mechanism. I'm not saying the stock exchange isn't manipulated, right? You have the same things, short selling, manipulation in the old world that you have magnified in the new world. But I think over time, hopefully things will settle and will become better. And teams and people and projects and businesses will be more educated and will have weapons to deal with this stuff,
right,
which simply you don't have at the moment.
And do you think also, Sascha, that the expansion of your own ecosystem via, a significant increase in STOs will help you make that switch in that scenario of the 80-20 split, so that you just simply have more people understanding that you're a real deal startup, you're a real deal company, and that you're actually building for a very long-term future?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, you never know, right? It always depends on the asset. It depends on the project. We will probably have STOs that will be very, very much hyped up, and they will get a lot of attention. That will happen. It happens in any industry. It happens, not always the best company will win. Sometimes the hyped up marketed companies will come up or they will collapse. We're hoping that over time, quality will prevail. And we can only control what we can control ourselves.
And that's why we speak so much. It all comes down to integrity as well for the team. What about what about market making as well, Sascha? Because obviously moving into that decentralized stock exchange, you certainly know about legitimate market making that does exist. And also there's that very concerning conduct that does happen in crypto. So what's your position on market making in the future with regard to the way in which it should? Yes, that's right.
Market making is important. I mean, you have professional market makers in the traditional world. Some are, have dubious practices, some have good practices, but there are some high-profile market makers. And you need them. You need them in a market to provide liquidity and to support liquidity, at least in the initial stages. So that's why you need them in the old world. With our exchange, we're looking at professional market makers as well. And we've already talking to some in future how to collaborate and work. You usually have to pay them. You have to pay them a lot of money. Yeah, that's the same in the old world. In the new world, I've seen market makers with just really bad tool sets, with just bad practices. I've read and heard about all the bad stuff and seen some of it. Other than that, I don't spend too much time on this stuff. I'm interested, but do I lose sleep over, these market makers and bad market makers? Not really. We're focusing on our own world, and we're focusing on good market making for our exchange. Will there be bad actors everywhere? Again, you have good and bad everywhere.
Sure, it makes complete sense. Now, moving across to your treasury, I really want to talk about that because you spend a lot of time with your team building that model. Can you talk us through the process of the clients that you do on board and how they do work through that treasury system, or do in fact they use the exchanges that you have? So say I'm a client, do I, engage with the exchange directly to make sure that I'm making payment through there, or do I do that back-end approach that you've set up to enable a more seamless client experience?
What do you mean, clients? Businesses or investors?
Or the businesses that are on board, essentially, those that, the STOs, essentially, any of the parties that engage in the treasury system, through the model that you've built. How do they do that, Sascha? Do you set it up strictly so it runs through the back end of your system using the treasury model, or can they in fact go straight to the exchange?
What do you mean treasury model? Well, you mean
the way in which
paying us, or
exactly? So using a system in which it's all done by you. You're that go-to point, or can they do it by bypassing you and go straight to the exchange?
No. They at the moment they pay us directly. We invoice businesses directly, and then in future it will go through the APIs that we provided. When it's about the STO lockups and the license fees and all that, but we're still developing and building these things. So the API, I know a lot of people have asked for the API and to see the API, how it works. We haven't really fully developed that yet.
Okay.
Because we wanted to get the manual model right before we're implementing an automated process.
I see.
But they won't be able to circumvent us. Okay.
Now, in that instance, that's secure. We know that you are the go-to point. How does that affect the token supply? Is this super important for those who want to better understand the token economic model? Obviously, there's systems in place so that it reduces that circulating supply.
Yeah, there is basically. So when you do an STO, you lock up a certain amount of your funds to conduct the STO. We also have the transaction fees. We have the exchange. With the lending piece, we're looking at other basically models to lock up CHX effectively. And I think we've written a token block somewhere. I think it's explained somewhere, but we'll update it as we add more use cases for CHX.
Right, and there's already a substantial amount that is locked up. So without, again, speculating on price, because you simply can't, can you teach us what the likely and logical implications of staking or locking tokens up out of the supply is likely to do for the token without commenting on price? I mean, it's a tough question, but the logic behind it, though, I'm trying to better understand and speak with you about, because there's a reason why you built this model.
Yeah, it will just basically become more scarce over time. So we want as many tokens to be utilized and used by the users, by the investors, by the businesses. The lockups and the releases will basically help with the supply and demand. That's the simple mechanism.
Well, if we go by the reason model, scarcity key point of value.
Yeah. We're not creating more tokens, and the good thing is for us, it was all about kind of the network and stabilizing the network, and the validators should be incentivized, rewarded, and they should be penalized when they do the wrong thing. So it's the typical decentralized, self-organized network, which is a really powerful thing when implemented properly. Got it.
Now, with regard to the validators as well, I wanted to ask you whether or not you have plans to have some sort of selection process, for quality node runners, for those that want to be the validators, or is this going to be
absolutely No. In future, we're thinking of criteria. At the moment, it's open. Anyone can do that. And this is really, really good. This is good. We're still running a quite substantial amount of validators ourselves. And I think we've been pretty open about it, because we want to ensure the network is stable. We don't want the situation like we've seen in other projects and groups where suddenly a specific region or group takes over. That's something we want to prevent if we can. Now, that doesn't really work in the true decentralized nature, where everything is open, everything is public, and everyone can do that. But we still want to be able to really understand who's participating, who's doing the right thing, simply because we're dealing with quite significant financial products.
Right, and that also moves to the question of security. Clearly, having some sort of quality or some sort of criteria process means that you, once again, ensure that you have a network that is and remains secure.
Yeah, Yeah. We have QA, we have testing, we do security and penetration testing with every major release. We had our blockchain tested by Chain Security, for example, to look at the smart contract and some of those things. Chain Security guys, they found the Ethereum issue that prevented them from releasing, I think, last time. So they're really, really knowledgeable in that space. So we're working and we're always expanding to looking at other information security groups that can help us to lock and harden our network. Something we take quite serious.
Well, it's good that you do also those auditing process to make sure that there's no bugs or there's no issues, or if they are fixed. Now, I wanted to just touch on the future partnerships as well. We talked a lot about the ones that were pre-existing, especially in light of enterprise. What can you tell us about the big plans, the big ticket items for big business that you do want to do in the future that you can disclose in any way?
Yeah, again, with FiTech, we're working on, funding hedge fund product, which is quite exciting. It's still quite theoretical of nature, so we're pitching it towards their clients and seeing what the reception is. We had a conversation this week in the fund space. Should we introduce products in that space? Our lending piece, so basically businesses getting a loan through institutional or semi-professional investors, that is gaining a lot of traction. We're seeing a lot of positive response from partners. We're onboarding institutional investors, asset and wealth managers at the moment, to basically give us the funds so we can actually help them place their offers to businesses that are required. We're exploring rating tools at the moment. I think I mentioned that before. Yeah, so we want to partner up with rating agencies to provide us this rating tool. And we're also looking at ways of how can you automate rating equity, positions. How can you rate businesses formally without having to vet them manually? So there's a lot of stuff happening in that space.
Right, and obviously those product verticals of debt, as you mentioned, that's significant, and lending as well. With regard to some of the names we can anticipate in the short term, because you're very tight-lipped as always before things actually happen. But in the next, say, month or so, are you aware of anything that's going to come forth? Are we going to see more updates with regard to some of these things that are going to unravel?
Yes.
Okay, but you're not telling me, Sascha. Okay, all right, I understand. With regard to trading, I also wanted to ask you, with regard to STOs, what's the process once you do have an STO that does list and is live? Do you anticipate in the future that there'll be more of an immediate transition into trading once they are onboarded, or will it sometimes take more time for that process to happen where they become live and accessible?
I'm not sure. We have to see it. We have very little experience in that space because simply we have the first one now. I think you, Brad, you will see both. You'll see probably immediate trading, and then you will see certain lockups in future. I think you will see a whole variation as you would have in the traditional securities.
Right. Okay. Now, time itself. We talked about that, very loosely, but is that the major criterion that you're asking, or is that the major point that you really need people to understand, is the fundamental sort of point of value? You need it to really build this out, especially in the crypto sort of scene. Obviously, there's a lot of impatience. We want to see everything, grow rapidly, but underneath everything, are you asking the community essentially to give you time?
I'm not asking the community for anything. I think we've delivered most elements, I'm not saying all of them, within the time frame that we've outlined. I know people are asking us for roadmaps and for delivery dates, and we're specifically not mentioning some of those elements simply because you're starting to run. You start to think short term rather than long term. We have a long term plan. We have a long term vision. That vision we follow religiously, and it works out from a business perspective. I think the community, those that have been with us, that are long-term holders, they understand. We engage with them, we explain. But we had short-term people. We had traders and speculators, and they were trying to get onto us, and they might have been a little bit disappointed now because we're not doing what they want us to do, because we have a vision and a plan. We're not changing from that.
Well, does it worry you if you see an exodus to be frank, if you see the price decline, that means people technically, or depending on whether there's manipulation more across the board. But if we just play a very sort of use a very simple approach or analysis, if people are moving out because they want to play a speculative game, does it concern you? Because once again, there are those people who still really value the long-term vision.
Absolutely, it concerns me greatly, and I'm not standing and sitting here and saying, it's great that CHX as a token price has, reduced over time, or has gone up and then down and gone up and all that. That's not great, and we don't like that.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it absolutely concerns me because again, we feel obligated to support our community and everyone. We want all the token price to go up. But unfortunately, you have these weird, strange market factors. You have manipulation across the board and these sort of things, and you're kind of sucked into the same stream. And that is a concern for the entire industry. And people should be open and honest about it, and projects should be open and honest about it, and do something about it.
And Sascha, thank you for acknowledging that as well, because at the end of the day, whether it's you or whether it's any other startup, if those people at the beginning were there to support, to authentically support the long-term vision, and thus, put their money into a pre-utility because you needed to build the ecosystem to become that utility, then I think that, it behooves all parties like yourselves to really acknowledge that. And you just did that. So I appreciate that. Now, rebranding, that happened again. Can you tell us why, you tend to, rebrand frequently?
Well, we started with Chainium as a name, and I think no one really liked the name. I think we had no marketing team. We just decided ourselves, and then we had a marketing team, and we changed into OWN. OWN was a major rebrand from Chainium to OWN, but you can't find OWN. If you search for OWN, you get Oprah Winfrey Network and other sort of OWN kind of companies. So we had to do a small rebrand into WEOWN because now everyone can find us. And I know some people are really concerned about, I've seen people like sending to me on Twitter saying, I'm really concerned because you're doing a rebrand. Why are you concerned? Companies are rebranding all the time. And we've just done a next step and the next evolution to rebrand, and everything else we're focusing on as well. So people should actually be happy that we are dynamic, we're evolving, that we're looking at ways where people can search for us, they can find us, SEO, CA, all these kind of methods we're looking at. And that's why we're adopting and changing and making our brand a bit more easier for people to understand. But again, I have some people I just simply can't understand.
Well,
they want us to be stale.
Well, I appreciate your transparency about this and the reasoning. And to play the devil's advocate, perhaps also, as we've talked about, Sascha, given that there's such a predominance of crypto crap out there, perhaps it's right, it's reasonable for people to want to understand rebranding, given that there's so much crap out there, as opposed to valid reasons for rebranding.
We're pivoting and changing all the time. People see the brand, but people don't see the technology. They don't see the products. They don't see our approach, how we pitch. Every month we're changing our tune. We're trying to simplify messages, and we're doing that with everything. And branding we're doing as well. We looked at our logo and we looked at the appeal. We looked at the traditional market and how we can basically cater for them. We constantly change our messaging on the website, our path, because we want people to have easier access and understand where we get to easier. Some people that say these comments, they have no idea. They're very short-sighted, and it actually makes me quite angry because it seems to me they just want us to do nothing.
Right. Well, you've made it very clear it's the opposite. You're actually innovating with the brand to reflect the innovation, and the growth of your ecosystem. Yeah. So it makes sense to me.
It's the tip of the iceberg. Okay.
Now, with regard to funding, how's things going with your runway? Do you have the right budget set up? Are you making sure that you're protecting the team for the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a bit more about it, Zach. Come on. You're very tight-lipped.
Yeah. No, I mean, we are, I think I mentioned it in the community. We're doing a private round at the moment to basically support the next stages of the business. We need third-party and external funding to do what we do.
Okay.
We're planning to do a real major funding round next year, but that takes time because, again, we have grand plans for growth, global domination in the sense of products and services. I'm having a lot of institutional investor conversation at the moment. There's a lot of demand for our product, for investment, and these sort of things. But I can't really say more around that because that would harm.
Sure. But can I ask you this, though, Sascha? What does it mean when you start to do those raises? What will it mean for those who've supported the pre-utility, now utility, in that context? Will there be a distinction between those in that round you're going to do or are in the process of doing and those that have been there right from the outset?
No. I mean, those that have invested in the utility, the more investment that goes into the business, into the product, the more usage should there be. There should be a clear correlation. So, and at the same time, we're still debating to potentially do a public round like an STO. But at the moment, because simply the noise with our utility token and the need we have for growing strategic partnerships means that we're doing a little bit privately at the moment.
Got it. Well, there's certainly a lot happening in this space. I mean, we could literally talk for hours, but we perhaps should wrap up.
I think we have, right?
Yes, I mean, we certainly have, and I really appreciate your time. Obviously, we've talked about security. I'm just going through these last few questions that I want to ask you. One of the community members did want to ask you, given that you are a very robust system, you are very replete in all these different technological layers. We've made that clear. Are you concerned at all sometimes that you perhaps have bitten off more than you can chew, in the sense that the scope and sort of the magnitude of this is really significant compared to most startups?
Again, we get sometimes the feedback, are you doing a little bit too much? Are you focusing on maybe too many things? But how can you focus on too little or too many things if you have a lot of plans for an entire industry, right? We don't focus on one region specifically. We could just try to focus on Germany or Switzerland or Austria, but no, we're focusing on the UK, we're focusing on Europe. We're now expanding. We have a partnership with the US, so we're always looking at the US. And we're now moving into Asia as well. So we are a global system. We are a global marketplace. And our vision is to be the global system for private SMEs to raise funds, to manage funds, and to attract investors. And so you have to do a lot to achieve that.
Right. And in the context of STOs, I wanted to just ask you one final question, Sascha, and that is more of an open question. What's your view on the STO space more generally? Are you bullish on this? Are you really confident that this can really happen? Especially given earlier in the interview, you mentioned that there's a lot of businesses that aren't quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, people in the crypto community, on the crypto space, they thought last year STOs will be the new ICO, and it will be a boom. The STO space is far more complex, far more regulated, far more long-winded. However, there are so many benefits. The benefits of having direct settlement, not T+2, T+3, but T+ real time is massive. The cost reduction from taking out the middleman, the CSD, the registrars, the brokers, some of the banks are tremendous. So over time, adding all these economical factors, STOs, or this sort of kind of peer-to-peer engagement between an investor and a business through securities products will win. It takes time, but the benefits are so obvious, it will work out.
Right.
But is it going to be the boom like ICOs? No, it's not, and it's slower than that, but that's good because the ICO period is dead.
I see. So not like ICO, not like IEO. It's not designed to be that extremely fast moving, almost on steroids approach of, very swift upward movements. And then we see crashes in. Okay. So you're really
ICOs and IEOs are a short-term blip, I think, in the scheme of things. I think utility tokens in itself will always have a really good use, and that's great that this asset was created, as I said before. But I mean, IEOs, IEOs, they only serve the exchange, no one else. So that'll go. If you don't have, I think I mentioned that in one of the tweets which I sent to you. If you don't have a balance between a seller and a buyer, and both kind of win or keep things in balance, it will go off track. And exchanges have shown that they're the only winners with IEOs.
Right.
So
you're
that
looking
won't
at
survive.
long-term benefactors well into the future. You're looking at making sure that there are real ecosystems, that there are real assets, more importantly. And with this investment platform, you're trying to lead the way in an authentic, with authentic leadership of something that can actually be viable for the long term. So, Sascha, thank you very much. As the CEO of WEOWN, it's been enlightening as always. You've been really open today and talked about things that you really don't like to. And I appreciate that, mate, because quite simply, people need to hear more from CEOs as we start to really build for the future of blockchain and crypto.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for your time. You've been tough, and hopefully I wasn't too political in that sense. We try to be really open, but we've got burned so badly every now and then. We had to kind of detract a little bit, but we have so many fans and supporters and people that really give us encouraging feedback, and those are the ones we listen to. And yeah, with these sort of things comes noise and comes also the darker side, but we're professional enough to deal with all that. And guys like you, Brad, it's really important to bring these messages across and help kind of clean that industry. It needs cleansing. Yeah.
Well, mate, I'm always here to continue the conversation. At the end of the day, I really respect and appreciate the work you're doing. And there's simply no better information for myself and for all the crypto, listeners out there. Again, you are that crypto gold because you can tell us right from the CEO's position and perspective what's really going on. Once again, thank you for the transparency. And I wanted to also thank those who participated in the questions and the feedback, because through that we're able to ask some of those tough questions, and you certainly have provided answers to them. And hopefully, Sascha, we can catch up again in the future and talk further about the developments that WEOWN have. And certainly as you start to onboard more STOs, it's going to be exciting because, once again, it's about being real. And when we see more empirical evidence of that, that's going to really change that narrative from the 80-20 split and convince people that perhaps it's not just about speculation, but it's about a lot more than that.